are due for review. And you start, and they will note that what is needed. They will tell you first that your tariff codes are high, you are a risk to the medical aid scheme, you charge more than your peers, so bring the following. Bring the clinical notes, bring the diaries where you were seeing patients, bring the files of the patients. Now this is where the problem begins, because ethically so, how do I disclose the information, private information of the patient?
Yeah,
to a third party.
Indeed.
Now, I've got three problems with that. One, why am I getting audited, especially with confidential information of the patient? Two, why are these audits, the manner in which these audits are done, why is it targeted to blacks and Indians? And I'm not saying white people are not audited. Definitely they are, but very few percentage of them, because you don't hear anything about white. In the list, you don't get even the white
One
people.
single name.
No,
There's not a single name of any white doctor on that list.
Yes. So now you start to question, why is it only blacks, and why audits in confidentiality of the patients? Two, why are you audited without a contract? Remember, if you say you're going to audit the health practitioners, you should give us first the contract. When we sign, you should make us sign something. Give us a contract that you will be audited, and when are you audited? What is it that is audited? So
That's just a reminder of what's been unfolding here on the show this week. The issue of medical aids discriminating against black and Indian doctors. It really has gained significant traction this week after the SABC broke the story. We've had some medical aids and the Council of Medical Schemes responding. So to take this further, we're joined in studio by the Health Minister, Dr. Motsoaledi, who in fact reached out to us to let him respond to all of this and try and get to the bottom of it. Minister, we thank you for your time, and we thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you for having me.
So I know that you have been talking out very much so against fraud that has been committed to medical aids. And it is something that you are, you're going out and you're driving very strongly about the amount of fraud that is taking place. How big is fraud against medical aids?
Well, it is quite big. If I'm not mistaken, it is estimated at something like 25 billion rands per annum, which is quite substantial. And that's why the Council of Medical Scheme, which is a statutory body that regulates medical aid scheme, together with the SIU, together called a conference with the stakeholders on the 28th of February to discuss the issue. And internationally, it is compacted into a term called FWA, fraud, waste, and abuse. And we have to deal with it as such.
Yeah. So you outlined in your speech, which I have read and seen, you've outlined how medical practitioners and the lengths they go to in conjunction with patients to defraud medical aids. And I understand that, and that is a very big issue. However, what's at play here is a lot of black and Indian medical practitioners are coming forward and saying that the medical aid schemes are being racist and biased towards them. Are you aware of this? Do you know anything about this?
Well, Leanne, if you read the whole speech which I delivered on the 28th of February during the summit, I said there are two issues here. There is fraud, waste, and abuse. But there's also the manner in which you deal with it. And I said we can't use vigilantism. You can't, that there are times where in society people perceive that there's a high level of crime and they want to take the law into their own hands. And that's called vigilantism. I very strongly discouraged it. Meaning those people, especially the funders, the medical aid scheme, which feel that they've been defrauded, they've got no right to use vigilante methods to try and retrieve and claw back the money they've got. They've got to follow the law. If you read the speech, I actually emphasize that things like entrapment, illegal camera surveillance in doctor surgeries, etc., cannot be allowed. Cannot be allowed because that's vigilantism. Because the legal system of the country has to be followed. There are law enforcement agencies, there are judicial systems. Nobody has got the right to take the law into their own hands. Now, having said so, this part about blacks and Indians being targeted. I'm not aware of it. I've got no proof. But last week, I met the representative of the doctors who are accused. I called the registrar of the Council of Medical Schemes in the meeting to discuss the matter. And after that meeting, I wasn't really satisfied. I elevated it to the board of the Council of Medical Schemes. I was informed last night that they are holding that meeting today with the affected doctors. I even requested them to submit the list to the Council of Medical Aid Scheme, because after all, the Council of Medical Scheme is a regulator.
Yes.
It has been put together by an act of parliament through Medical Schemes Act number 131 of 1998. They are the regulator, and I said, please sit down and regulate this. You can't have a racial profiling of fraud, wastage, and corruption and abuse.
Yeah.
There can't be a racial profiling. Is wrong.
And we spoke to them yesterday, and they were also unaware of it. They hadn't seen the list, as have you.
Who was not aware of?
The Council of Medical Schemes.
Yes.
So they weren't aware of it, and they also hadn't seen the list. They were requesting the list. The list I'm referring to is a list of doctors that I think was published by GEMS. That's the medical aid they have this list, which is a very thick paper, which says you cannot use these doctors. And that list is very much so. It contains a lot of African, black names, Indian names, but not, I think there might be one or two white names on that list. And that is what's in question here, is why it seems that is the issue and why they don't. Now, that's one. You've spoken to the list, which you haven't seen, which you're going to be looking into. The other thing is the medical aids. Now, I can't tell you the amount of letters that I've been sent from just viewers, from doctors and everybody else that have received the same letter from medical aid saying that they are asking for copies of clinical notes. So if I'm a psychologist or a doctor or whatever I am, the medical aids are asking for my clinical notes for patients, copies of treatment charts, copies of the referral letter for the treating doctor, which I understand, and copies of all pathology results for the period of dialysis indicated. This is just obviously for a specific patient. Isn't this breaching the patient-doctor confidentiality?
Well, I'm actually here to announce publicly that no doctor must ever submit confidential information to third parties. Never. That's never done. Even I am not allowed to do so, except under two conditions. If the patient gives you a written consent to disclose their confidential information, yes, you can, through that written consent. Or if you are instructed so by a court of law or a quasi-judicial structure, because we have got to work within the framework of the law. I'll give you an example, Leanne. There are members of parliament who, for political reasons, ask me a question. And you are aware that in terms of parliamentary rules, a minister may not refuse to answer a question. They ask me a question to provide them with the names of the patients who suffered and died from listeria, and give details of that. Obviously, they might have been sent by somebody who has got an interest of that, using parliamentary laws that the minister cannot refuse. But I said, look, when it comes to confidential information of patients, a patient who comes to me in all confidence and give me information, I can't disclose that.
Yes.
And I told them, I'm not going to do that unless members of parliament go to the individual patients and say, I want information about you. Please write this written consent so that the minister can give me information. Or alternatively, a court of law has to instruct me to do that. And that's the procedure we're following. So I'm here to say any doctor who has been requested to hand in confidential information to a third party cannot do so. And I regard medical schemes as the third party, except if that third party is part of the treatment protocol of the patients. And a funder cannot be part of the treatment protocol of the patient. Their job is to fund, not to be part of the treatment and the secrets and all that. So that should not be done. No doctor should do that. I think it will be very wrong. In fact, it will destroy the healthcare system of the country.
Which is the problem. And these medical doctors and the practitioners that are here and shouting out are saying they're refusing to do this because it is exactly what you're saying.
I'm encouraging them to refuse, and they must not agree Because otherwise
But
the
the thing
healthcare
is, they're
system...
not getting paid. And there's where the problem comes in.
That's where the regulator must come in.
Yeah.
That's why I then called the regulator and say you have got to... Look, medical schemes are not just working out of the blue. They are licensed by the regulator. And the regulator can take that license away if they don't follow the rules. And from the little I know, I'm not an expert, remember.
Yeah.
Parliament has set up a law to put a regulator who must be an expert. That's the Council of Medical Scheme, right? That's why I refer the matter to them. They must then look into the issue. What I know, without being an expert, is that every 2 years, they've got to assess that this medical scheme, who we gave a license to work as a medical scheme, is still working within the law. And that's what they need to determine.
Yeah.
And say, look, you have got no right not to pay this doctor arbitrarily. I think that actually appears in my speech, that medical aid scheme have got no right to arbitrarily withhold a payment, you know. Leanne, maybe let me give you this example. Medical schemes usually say, we have discovered that we have paid this doctor wrongly. And I'm not challenging that. But even the state, which has got a lot of power, is actually not allowed to do that by the judicial system. Because within the public service rules, it is said that if the government discovers that they've paid an employee money that is not due to them, maybe as a form of a salary or a bonus or whatever, if they discover, they can actually retrieve that money.
Yeah.
But it goes on to say, and there was a court case where the state law advisor had to come to cabinet to workshop the president and the ministers. That court case, I think it occurred in Gauteng, was saying even if the state discovered that, it has got no right to unilaterally just go to retrieve the money. It must go to the judicial system and say, I've got proof that this person got money that is not, they are not entitled to, and I want to retrieve it. And the judicial system must check it and give you permission. The second example I can give, even if police suspect a crime is being committed, they can't just get into a house and start searching. They go to a magistrate and ask for a search warrant.
Indeed.
And say, we suspect there's been something wrong here. Look at the facts, and the judicial officer will say, yes, I think you are right, I'm granting you this, please go and search. But now what I've heard, that what I think is happening, is those laws are not being followed. These are common laws. It's not necessarily the laws of Medical Schemes Act. It's common law of the country, that nobody has got the right to take the law in their own hands.
Yeah.
Regardless of the proof they have, they must still go to the judicial system to ask for that permission. Now, because that seems not to be happening, even in the meeting I've had with the doctors last week, I then said the council must call those doctors, sit down with them, follow up the issues, call those medical schemes, follow up the issues. After all, they are the regulator, and I'm happy when I phoned the council yesterday that I hear such a meeting is today. I heard over the media, they wrongly said they are going to meet the minister. There's no need to meet the minister. I met them last week.
They need to intervene.
They need to intervene. There's no more reason for meetings with the minister. They must just say, this is the law and we're intervening.
Okay.
And intervention consists of nobody has got the right to take the law into their own hands.
Minister?
Because the judicial system of the country has been set up to do exactly that.
I'm going to pause you. We're going to, I know you can stay on just for a couple more minutes. We're going to just quickly bring our top stories in our news bulletin.
I do have time. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad. I'm happy to hear that, Minister. We're going to steal a little bit of your time.
Okay.
We quickly want to get the news, and then we'll continue this conversation. Remember, write to us at Morning Live SABC. If you're in this position, if you've got a question for the Minister, or you'd like to comment on that, you're more than welcome to. But it is 7 o'clock. Quickly over to you, Sakina.